Let's talk about the Debt Review Awards. So, the Debt Review Awards is an industry awards event and process designed at identifying people who work in debt review or involved in debt review that are doing well, and to shine a bit of a light on those people and say, hey, well done. You're doing a great job, or you're really making a lot of effort, you're standing out, and to recognize that hard work. If you are a debt counselor, then I will challenge you to say that sometimes you don't feel appreciated enough. This is a way that we can increase appreciation for our industry, and recognize the hard work that's done. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the history of the Debt Review Awards. So, for a number of years back, after the Debt Review started, there was a lot of talk about how do we professionalize. It's something we're still talking about to this day. And one of the things that we looked at the time was, is there any way to recognize people who are doing well in the industry, and why is there no awards process? So, for those of you who know me, I'm very impatient. I couldn't wait, so I just went ahead and started arranging and asked a few people for help, and we started the Debt Review Awards process. Now, it started back in 2014, so that's been a while now. We hired a venue. We served some snacks and drinks. We invited the NCR and all the debt counselors we could think of, and a couple of the credit providers, and we hosted an event together, right? What had happened behind the scenes before this was that we had asked a committee of people who were kind of the leading individuals in the industry at the time, who were doing training, who were involved in all the different aspects of it, including on the financial side of things, the credit provider side of things, the debt counselor side of things, the legal side of things. And we sat together and we went through all the people who were practicing at the time and tried to identify who was doing well, who wasn't. And it resulted in some of our awards that were handed out on that day, the very first awards, the Golden Piggy Bank Awards. And from humble beginnings, if you look, you can see that I think we had about 100 people in the room on that day. But we were quite satisfied that we'd spoken about everybody. We'd looked at their advertising processes, what we knew about them, and we were able to hand out these awards. And so you'll recognize some of the faces, maybe if you've been around for a while, some of the faces at the time going home with those first awards. But it was a lot of work. So if you've ever been on a committee like that, trying to talk about hundreds of different people, you can imagine it gets very tiring. We did session after session after session. And I think we used Skype back then, and it was quite a thing. There was also the aspect of, there were a few people that were having a say then, which maybe works for maybe a wine or a whiskey, but it lacked a little bit of industry engagement. So we did later change that process to a crowdsourced kind of peer process, and we used a little bit of technology. And what we did from the next year onwards is we asked people to complete surveys and peer reviews to kind of share the load. It wasn't very nice and easy for the people who had been on those committees, so we thought this was a good solution. So then over the years, we've hosted a number of different Debt Review Awards events. The process happens in the background each year, throughout the year, people putting information into a computer. And then once a year, we get together at an event, an awards event, where we put everybody in the same room. If you're nominated, you get invited. Sponsors get invited too, because they help us pay the bills. And we invite a few people from the industry who've made a significant difference that year. And even during lockdown, yes, Corey, that's you, showing off during lockdown. Even lockdown didn't stop us. We made the switch to an online event that year, and we learned something interesting, that it's quite nice to be able to watch the event if you're somewhere else. And so from that time onward, we have live streamed the event itself. And each year we learn lessons, and we're trying to improve in that. And each year, even with the actual in-person events, we're also learning lessons, doing new things, trying new things. So we have entertainment at the awards, so people can have a little bit of fun when they're there, something a little bit different, something that can help make the event a little memorable. But we've held the event all over the country. We've held it in Joburg, in Cape Town, and Durbs. We have looked at some other venues, and who knows where we'll be this year. There's some talk about possibly this coming year, Durban again, getting some love, maybe Joburg. But the most recent one was in Cape Town. And it's just nice for us. If we can move it around, it just gives more people an opportunity to attend in person. But we're very happy with the online broadcast so that everybody can attend, regardless of where you are in the country. So, yes, alpacas, fantastic. Right. And over the years, we've had some pretty fun times. We've come quite far. We've learned and we've had some celebrations, and it's been nice to identify those companies that are taking the lead. You don't always agree with the winners, but the statistics basically are giving us that information, and we'll dive a little bit into that. Um, yeah, everybody having a good time at these events. Right. So, what is the purpose of the Debtfree Awards? Now, I have said earlier that the awards is to identify excellence and those who in the industry who are working extra hard, going maybe above and beyond. But it's only one of the purposes of the awards itself. With our industry, I think we all realize that there's reputational risks involved. Some industries can develop a bad reputation over time. So if we think about maybe the views that we've had about admin orders in the past, that's something that we don't necessarily want for debt review. Maybe we've had views about other industries, and we can develop quite negative opinions of that industry, and it can really impact on who signs up, right? So for debt review, there's also this reputational risk. And the purpose of debt review, and particularly the awards then, is to shine a light and say, well, look, sure, maybe there's one or two bad apples out there, but as an industry, we're trying really hard. Here are the people who are really putting in the effort. Here are the people who go home with awards. This is a professional industry. It's a serious industry. We're dealing with serious topics, and we're trying to keep people's money safe. We're trying to help people get through the process. And it also gives the media an excuse to kind of give a little extra coverage to the awards and the event, and then thereby the industry. So it's a positive kind of impact that we're trying to have on the industry. That is the real purpose behind the thing. So it's lovely if you go home with an award, because it means, yes, your peers are watching you and recognize your hard work. But more than that, the actual awards itself is just a bit of a win for the industry, even if we don't go home with an award. Our next question would be then who participates. And as of today, there are 1,712 debt counselors and several thousand credit providers, 4 PDAs registered, and a number of other parties registered with the NCR. And we decided a while ago that this was the best criteria for those to participate. We had in the first and second year some input from consumers in a particular category, and it basically became a popularity competition. And it started to motivate people to ask their clients to vote for them and things like that. And while that might work in some ways as a popularity contest, it's not really what we were aiming for the awards. So it has subsequently come out of the awards process. Now, if you're registered with the NCR, you are able to participate. We will communicate with you and ask you, would you like to participate in the peer reviews? How will we do that? We will use the email address that is showing on the NCR's database, which is great if your email address is correct. If it is not, or if it's an info address or an admin address, please just be aware it might be going to those addresses, those invitations. Sometimes people can go through quite a long time period in the year and they say, oh, I haven't got anything. Yeah, maybe just check those email addresses to make sure that you are getting not just our communication, but communication from the industry and from consumers. We do have a secondary database that we run. We also ask the different associations to communicate with people. But as you can imagine, we're dealing with almost 10,000 email addresses. We recognize that sometimes we're not going to get through to everybody. Some of the emails may end up in spam or things like that. But we try to communicate through as many associations, social media, in the magazine, and so forth, just to let people know about the process. The categories are various, and over the years, we're quite proud that we've been able to expand the categories. We really wanted to try and include recognition for as many people as possible. So in the past, we used to recognize the PDAs, the credit providers, and the DCs, but maybe there were two PDAs recognized, there were two DCs recognized, three credit providers. Over time, that really has expanded. So at the moment, on the credit provider side, we look at various different types of credit providers in an effort to kind of make things fair somewhat. I think that's the whole idea of having different categories. Someone who does vehicle finance maybe has quite a different operation from someone who offers short-term finance. And although they still interact with the Act and they still have to have certain things with their COBs and so forth, there are different things at play. On the debt counselor side, we've also tried to separate into smaller and smaller categories over time, just to also make it a bit more fair so that you are compared with someone similar to yourself. It'd be very difficult if you compared little old me to one of the national companies that's got thousands and thousands and thousands of clients, because our operations are very different, right? So although we once again follow the same legislated steps, just our operations, it's better to compare people who are similar. And although we've chosen the sizes, you can see them showing there 1 to 100 clients, 100 to 300 clients, and so forth. We do allow a little bit of play, and we do allow people to put themselves in a category, and then we check with the PDA and say, is this accurate? We do allow that, and it is something we're going to check in with people through the year a bit more often this year, just to see, because you can go up in a category. So for instance, if you have 250 clients now in December, maybe by mid-year next year, you've got 350 clients and you would change. So we're going to check in with people along the way. There's a lot of room for expansion, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We also recently started recognizing attorneys through a certificate process, because we were trying to figure out how do you evaluate attorneys, but essentially one for the credit providers, one for the debt counselors, and then a recognition in the Noshin Poor Award, which is in regard to someone who's standing out within that side of the industry. They don't have to be an attorney, but they're in the legal side of things, and they're making a significant contribution in some way to maybe nurturing and fostering people who in that space, helping others and helping consumers. And then we have very nice associated awards, often from our sponsors, who get involved in helping us identify, for instance, new debt counselors who've just entered the industry recently in the last 2 to 3 years, who are really taking off in their practices, doing well. Those who making significant contributions to the industry. In the past, some of the winners have been an attorney taking a matter to court, or someone who worked at the regulator, someone who's worked at the tribunal. These are people who are really having an impact within a 12-month period, or perhaps the other award we hand out is over I don't call it the lifetime award, but over a longer time period. That's also to be recognized. And then we have another sponsored award, the Technology Adoption Award. We're expanding that a little bit. Looking at people who are using technology. Technology is a very important part of our industry. And I think as we see more and more plugins and API connectivity between different parties, it's really making a big impact. And then this year, we've got some stuff coming. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment or two. You may wonder, well, how do I get recognized? How can people talk about me? Well, just to go back to one of our previous slides, if you are registered with the NCR, we will give you some coverage, right? You will have an opportunity to be considered. But how does it work? Because there's so many people, how do we do that? Well, essentially what happens is we send out an email to people, and we send them a list of maybe 10, 20 names, and we ask them a very simple question about this credit provider, this attorney, or this debt counselor, this PDA, and we ask them, is this a good person to talk about or not? You know, should we be talking about this person or not? Very simple, right? And it takes a few seconds for each person, and that's based on your personal interactions with those people who are your peers. If you are identified as one of the great people, good people to talk about, you get moved into the next step of the process where we communicate with people and we say, well, this company that we're talking about now, this credit provider, are they just average? Are they maybe not doing as great as some of the others, or are they above average? And then once again, that process takes a little while, and we identify those who are above average and we start talking about them more. Right. So just to show you a little bit of an illustration here, the computer helps us do this quite a lot, and we crowdsource this, as mentioned. A lot of people doing very brief interviews and very brief reviews helps identify who's average, who's above average, and it's the ones who are above average that we start to dig down into over the months that lie ahead. So if you think of it in this kind of way, it just helps us clarify who should we be talking about. And this often has an impact a little bit on those who join the industry a little bit later in the year, because you might have fewer reviews identifying you as a top candidate. But that's why we've introduced the new Rising Star category, so that we can help identify some of those people as well, potentially. But once we have those people, we then really, really dig down. And you may be wondering, what are the criteria? So essentially, the criteria are the legislated steps involved in your function. So if you're a credit provider or a debt counselor, there's certain things that you have to do that are legislated. We all know those processes, but it's important that we measure it. So what we're trying to get away from is someone saying, well, you know, that debt counselor, Bob, I really like Bob, so I'm just going to say nice things about Bob. Rather, what we want to do is we want to dig down a little bit deeper and say, okay, well, if you like Bob, how is Bob doing at the beginning of the process, right? Like when the things start, when he's sending you information about new clients and he's asking for information. How's he during the process? Is he keeping up the communication? Is he sending you the information, updating things? Or near the end of the process, are you overcoming any end balance differences, any difficulties like that? So that's what we try to do. And we do that in a very brief way at first, once again, asking, is this person average, above average, or below average? But later, we dig down into particular things like, how's the communication with this person's office? So if you've tried to get hold of maybe one credit provider, a bank, and they just stop answering their phones, then that might irritate you because you need to get hold of them. Or maybe you send them emails and they just never respond. And it's like, is my email disappearing? Well, that's an important thing because it has a serious impact on the consumers that we're trying to help. We asked things about how quickly are you getting information back. So you send a request for information. How quickly do you get a COB? Is everything showing on the COB? Are you getting that timely? And do you, I saw a beautiful one the other day. Do you get some sort of paid up letter with no information on it, right? Just blank. Fantastic. You can just add your own information. But we do this on the credit provider side and the debt counselor side. So the credit providers, they want to know things like, are the matters set down? Are we getting updated? What happens if there was a court order, some documents that came? Has that been actually put into process? Has the consumer been notified? If you would like more details on this, and I think it is one of those things that's kind of, we try to clarify. We have articles, 3 articles during the year in the Debtfree magazine that go in depth into the criteria. We also have it on the Debtfree Awards website. And also when you get the peer reviews themselves, you'll see some of the things that you've been asked to review about your peers. The same thing is happening on the other side. And that results in some companies and some individuals being identified in the top 10 in a category. From there, the points, if everything is a point allocated to it, identifies who's in the top 5 and maybe who's the highest rated in a particular category. And it's quite nice, you know, if you get recognized in this way, because you realize that, wait a minute, you know, a lot of my peers have spoken about me and realized I'm doing well. And it's nice to get that recognition. So if you have been recognized in the top 10, top 5, or maybe it's the highest rated in the past, congratulations. Very nice. There are a lot of people in the industry, like we said, on the debt counselor side, 1,700 different debt counselors. Imagine you identified as one of the top 10 out of that. And although we love the winners, and it is lovely to be the winner, there can only be one winner in each category, which is a bit limiting. We're very happy that these days we get to recognize about 60 debt counselors as being really standout this year. We're going to continue that in the 2025 process as well. I like to just look ahead a little bit to what is going to happen. So this year, one of the things we really want to do is encourage the journalists who are talking about debt review to think about the coverage that they're giving. And I think the journalists out there can have a significant impact on what's happening in debt review. And in particular, who's coming and signing up for debt review or not. And the information they have about debt review, is it accurate or not? So one of the things that we're looking to do this year is introduce certificates in regard to journalists who are producing articles about the debt review process. We hope that it kind of encourages them to do a little more homework if they are going to talk about our industry, to say good things if there's good things to be said. So we're looking forward to that, and we hope that it can bring them into the fold a little bit, as it were, and encourage them to give us more and more coverage over time. Obviously, we're not just going to give an award to someone who wrote a nice article about debt review, but people who give consistent, good coverage of the industry, and accurate coverage of the industry. We'll probably do this by committee. It's a little bit trickier. And if possible, we may then roll it out to everybody to then weigh in on who amongst a top group of candidates and a top group of articles are involved. We are also happy that with the help of some attorneys, we really able to kind of nail down a little bit more about what it takes to be a very high performing attorney in the world of debt review. So we're going to be handing out awards to attorneys this year. We haven't done that in the past. Remember, we said that we've handed out certificates in the past. We're actually going to hand out 2 awards this year, one for those representing debt counselors and one for those representing credit providers. For us, it's a big deal. We're happy that we're going to be able to do that. And then really a big thing that we're looking at this year is to try work closer with the PDAs. So we have handed out PDA awards in the past. We're looking at whether we will continue to do that this year, or if we can introduce a new way of looking at information from the PDAs in regard to more debt counselors, right? Because I think as debt counselors, it's nice to get the recognition. The PDAs have a lot of information, and we're busy with negotiations with them about that. Unfortunately, we don't have the final information about that yet, but we hope by the time the new year rolls around, we'll have finalized arrangements there, and then we'll put that out into the public space on the website, in emails, and in articles in the magazine. But we're hoping that we can get more recognition for more debt counselors. And they have a very different look at debt review compared to how maybe credit providers see it. So one of the things I will just say is that we acknowledge that the Debt Review Awards itself, it is a process where one party looks at the people on the other side of the fence, right? So as debt counselors, you say this credit provider is great. And we acknowledge that you might say that because they're always nice to you and they help you with your consumers. Is that what makes a great, credit provider? Well, there's a lot of different factors to it. But as far as debt counselors are concerned, those things that we look at, whether they're answering their phones, whether the staff know what they're talking about, whether they send you counter proposals for no reason, exactly, if they do all these things, that's what a debt counselor thinks is great about a credit provider or not. And the same with credit providers looking at the debt counselors. So there are some limitations, but we still think that it's a good way for us to identify who's performing well. So that's the information. If you'd like more information, I encourage you to check out debtreviewAwards.co.za. Also to follow the Debtfree socials. Recently, we've been asking people for input on what to do next. Even now, we still, for the next 2 months, will be implementing new changes into the process. So please, if you've got suggestions, send it to us. Let us know. We really want to improve things. So please let us know if you've got good ideas. And that can be about maybe just the event itself, the actual gala that we have. If you think that should be done in costumes on the beach in the Maldives, well, just let us know. Or if you think, hey, we should have, I don't know, a new category, please let us know. We really welcome your input.